think the thing I love most about living on the boat is waking up on the water. One of the very beautiful things that happens on a sunny morning is the sun reflects off the ripples on the water up through the window of my boat, and then the light plays in waves on the ceiling. And that's a very good way to wake up for me. I love the freedom of the boat, what it allows to happen that couldn't happen if I had to, say, get a mortgage and do all the usual things. I love the way I have to look after my home every day for it to work, filling up with water, emptying the toilet, all sorts of little jobs, DIY jobs that I need to do. I like to feel like I have to take care of my home every day. I feel close to the earth. Notice the seasons passing more than I think I would in a house. I like the simplicity of it. I can't have too many things, so I needn't be wanting too many things. I live on the boat because I love the boat, and I love that way of living. That's not a political statement, but it becomes a political statement the more the world changes in the way it is changing. It becomes more important for me to find a way of living that belongs in and on earth, and society as part of that. It becomes more important for me to find a way of remembering what I feel life is about in a world that doesn't always support that. So I suppose that becomes political because that's somewhat in conflict with the way the world is. Political in a small way, but yeah. The crisis feels for me like it's deepening my sense of connection with the earth. And I find hope in that. It's bringing me closer to what I have never been as close as I would like to be to. It's bringing me closer to the life around me. Being brought up like the rest of us, or most of the rest of us, in a kind of mainstream culture, which immediately disconnects the child from the earth through the schooling system, and creates a sort of cleft between our bodies and the earth's body. I think one of the challenges we're facing is how do we bridge that cleft again and know again, as if for the first time, what it means to live on the earth. I have been brought up and conditioned by society to behave in harmful ways. So the unlearning of that and the relearning, or the learning for the first time of what it might mean to relate well to the earth, that's a long road. The metaphor of the house being on fire is an apt one. And what would you do when the house is on fire is not be preoccupied with ensuring perpetual economic growth. But the thing that really breaks my heart about that is that if we could really collectively, if we knew the harm we were doing, it's like we don't know the harm that we're doing collectively because we don't recognize the beauty of the life that we're violating. It's just stuff, it's just the green stuff, it's just people in other countries who are going to be flooded, it's always over there. But that is our life. That is our life, that is all we really have.
I just love spending time at the Oxford City Farm. It's just such a nice place to spend time and connect with nature, and like most people wouldn't have that opportunity to do that, so yeah, I feel very privileged to have that. I think climate change is definitely something that I think about a lot, as it is a very pressing issue, but I feel like some people and organisations over dramatise it, and like it should be at the front of everyone's minds, but they shouldn't be panicking about it. I think it should be more hopeful, that just be reminded to act with the world in consideration rather than panic about it. Yeah. A lot of climate change activism, it's like centred around fear and like making people scared that something could happen, whereas I think what they should be doing is like inspiring people and making people hopeful that they can do things. Is like that's a much better and I guess more mentally healthy thing to do as well. The news, like it's just like too many bad things happening at once, and you don't really get enough time to process what's happening, and they could just make it a bit more pleasant to hear about and celebrate the things that are going well. The good things probably outweigh the bad things by probably like 2-1 or something. Spending time with animals, I think, has been at the City Farm, it's been quite an eye-opener for me, because like getting to know them, it also makes me aware about like how much of an ecological footprint they have as well, like the sheep grazing down all of the plants until there's only a monoculture of grass or thistles or something, and then like the chickens, like they just consume all insect life. The City Farm, it's making me feel hopeful, because it's just like a pocket of green in such a like industrialised world, and like having such a safe, like trusted space to go to where like everything is the same as it was before, and so much growth and life happening there rather than bad news. And I think it's something that everyone needs, because just to have a place to go to where you feel safe and optimistic, I think that should be a basic human right. I don't think politicians are doing enough, because they're like saying that they'll like do so many things for the environment, but I think that's just part of their manifesto and trying to get more supporters. So I think they're kind of just seeing it as an excuse, or like a quick, easy way to get more supporters. Like, I think it should be treated with more like seriousness, and like there should be more awareness in action.
Realized that scientists were already talking about greenhouse gases and their potential effect on climate change back in the 60s and 70s. They didn't all agree on what the consequences would be, but they could see that there were radical changes underway. It's just that nobody was listening at the time, or perhaps if we listened, we didn't make a connection with our everyday lives. And that really struck me, because it made me think about the capacity we have as human beings to think long term as opposed to short term, and to anticipate the consequences of our actions today. And I don't know if we, as a species, used to have that capacity, and if we've lost it, or if it's gone worse, or if we're not just very good at it in the first place. If we have the capacity to think longer term, then what do we need to do to get there? And that's made me think about a book by Roman Krishnarik, a recent book called The Good Ancestor. And he cites an experiment that's been done in which a group of people are asked to visualize life in several decades, think of themselves as living in the future, and then come back to now and make decisions about our lives now. And that experiment found that actually people who visualize themselves as our next generations actually make better decisions than people who think of themselves in the now. So that could suggest that we do have the capacity to think about what's coming in several generations and to change our lives accordingly. But to get there, we need to use our imagination. I don't believe in the idea that some cultures are rational and others are not. I think that as human beings, we have the capacity to think rationally in some contexts for certain aspects of our lives. And for other aspects, we think in different ways that involve perhaps the imagination and, lead us to believe in things we can't necessarily see and explain. And the world is too complex for us to really grasp. Why not think about having rituals where people could come together and remind themselves of how dependent we are of our environment? I'm not sure what form it could take, but I'm quite sure that there are things to learn from other societies that have been using dance, music, and other forms of performance, or indeed other artistic forms, to remind themselves of the importance of our connection to the environment. And we still live with the legacy of colonialism, which means that we have a tendency to assume that somehow there is more knowledge in the global north than in the global south, and that whatever people of color in the global south do is obsolete and not fit for the future. That tends to be the default assumption, which I think is a legacy of colonialism and a legacy of ideas of modernization that have emerged after World War II and which we're finding very difficult to get rid of. But I do think it would be important to take more seriously the efforts many other societies have done to live in a more symbiotic relationship with other species and with the environment. We're dooming ourselves to failure if we don't take those seriously. And we're also dooming them to failure.
Perhaps the thing that I should mention here is the fact that I swim in the river near my house. And I do so almost every morning. Last year I did that throughout the seasons. What we do at the river, usually, as I said, I go with a friend and maybe two sometimes. And we talk. And I realized that the way we talk, it's an expression that has come to me and it makes me laugh, but we literally bring ourselves and our problems and our things to be washed in the river. And then somehow the day starts in a different way. It's like you feel lighter, you feel you've left some behind, some heavy burden behind. It's an interesting start of the day. And the river and the seasons give you so much. Yeah. I am conscious of the fact that how much life there is around the river, and so much of that life we don't even know, because I'm not an expert and I can't recognize it. But how much life is actually supported or endangered by the health of the river itself. And this is not a wild river. This is very, surrounded by so-called civilization. And so it feels quite vulnerable to also, on one hand, incredibly vulnerable, and on the other hand, so part of the life of the city. It's the river that floods us quite regularly. It's the river that allows the meadow to still keep cows and horses on it. It still attracts a lot of wildlife on it. There's some farming going on. And so despite the fact that Oxford are not particularly agricultural settled, we obviously rely on the river, but it is a river that it's both a threat to us and in itself it's vulnerable. So even here in Jericho, where I live, it is now been declared a flood area, although historically has never flooded in Jericho. But the potential is now, but this is only in the last perhaps 6 or 7 years that have changed the boundaries of the flood-prone areas in Oxford. I was listening this morning to the speeches that Boris Johnson has made in New York about this is disasters are pending, it's an emergency. And yesterday I was in London at a demonstration against a summit for new oil extractions in East Africa. Very high level summit where major corporations were meeting to discuss new explorations. And these are enormous projects to exploit and extract oil in parts of Africa, as if Africa hadn't been exploited enough. And so how can a country like the GB hosting, and hence must be approving of such a conference, while the Prime Minister is saying the things he's saying? But maybe these contradictions are among the reason why for some people it is possible to live with that knowledge and still not do anything about it. I'm really scared in many ways. And of course, I'm not scared for myself. Nothing's, my life is not going to be affected beyond the very superficial way. But I am scared for my my wonderful grandchildren. I mean, my 2 grandchildren, understanding that this could be from dangerous weather events to profound economic disasters that they will have to survive, to new dangers that in health that we cannot even imagine. And strangely enough, and that perhaps is my ego speaking, the main problem for me is that I won't be there to defend them. I won't be there to save them, as if I could be the savior. And so that's what makes me think that I need to do what I can now. I used to be quite scared and shy to confront people, especially people who get cross when we do Extinction Rebellion action. I know I want to grow into that, into my courage. I want to grow into my, courage is the word. What do we need to give us permission to engage more in the kind of activism that the climate crisis needs? I think that would, if we discovered that, where that permission comes from for all of us, I think that would help a lot of us actually.